welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of your weekday programme, The Daily Debate, here on Nile TV International. For tonight, I am your host, Nancy Sarah Barakat. Tonight, it's all about Britain's withdrawal from the EU, known as the Brexit. Just to quickly recap for you, a referendum was held on Thursday, the 23rd of June, to decide whether the UK should leave or remain in the European Union. Leave won by 52% to 48%. The referendum turnout was 71.8%, the more than 30 million people voting. It was the highest turnout in a UK-wide vote since the 1992 general election. England voted strongly for Brexit, as did Wales, while Scotland and Northern Ireland both backed staying in the European Union. Following the referendum, British Prime Minister David Cameron resigned. Scotland's Nicola Sturgeon has told the BBC that Holyrood could effectively block the UK's exit from the EU and will lobby EU member states directly for support to ensure that Scotland can remain part of the bloc. That all happened while Northern Ireland's Deputy First Minister has called for a border poll on a united Ireland. Several protests have also been held against results of what has been labelled by some as the Grey referendum, and against more Eurosceptic older voters as they come to terms with the momentous referendum to pull Britain out of the EU, with the hashtag #NotInMyName trending on Twitter. Moreover, more than 2 million Britons and UK residents have signed a petition calling for a second vote, forcing lawmakers to at least consider a debate on the issue. Parliament has to consider a debate on any petition posted on its website that attracts more than 100,000 signatures. Meanwhile, over in Europe, the European Union has clarified the way that the UK can kickstart formal negotiations to exit the bloc. It says Britain can trigger Article 50, which sets a 2-year deadline for a deal, by making a formal declaration either in a letter or a speech. How do my guests view the UK's current situation? What is their opinion about the Brexit as a whole? How will Britain's withdrawal from the EU affect European nations and Britain's future as well? All these questions and more to be asked and to be answered later on in the programme. But as always, we'd like to bring you a top story, or a story making headlines here today, and that is President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's meeting with US Congress delegation headed by Dana Rocker-Backer. The meeting was attended by Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and the charge d'affaires of the US Embassy in Cairo. Presidential spokesman Ali Youssef said that President el-Sisi welcomed the delegation and stressed on the importance of Egyptian-American strategic ties. He asserted Egypt's keenness in developing and enhancing Egyptian-US cooperation in various fields, adding that both countries share long historical relations as they face mutual challenges topped by the increase in terrorism. And to tell us more about this meeting, we're being joined now over the phone by Mr. Mohammed Sabrin, Managing Editor at Al-Ahram newspaper. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Mr. Mohammed? Mr. Mohammed? Mr. Mohammed, can you hear me? Unfortunately, we cannot take... Oh, Mr. Mohammed can't hear me. Let me try again. Mr. Mohammed. Unfortunately, we don't have Mr. Mohammed over the phone with us. Now, let's carry on with our programme. And for our first report, let's take a closer look at the Brexit and the protests that were held by young people following the referendum. And then we'll be back to discuss that. Let's stay tuned.
Young people vented their anger on Saturday against more Eurosceptic older voters as they came to terms with the momentous referendum to pull Britain out of the EU, with the hashtag #NotInMyName trending on Twitter. A 12,000-strong survey of referendum voters published by pollster Michael Ashcroft found that 73% of 18 to 24-year-olds and 62% of 25 to 34-year-olds had voted Remain, while 60% of people aged over 65 had voted Leave. Within hours of the results, there was a small demonstration outside Downing Street. At a meeting of the opposition Labour Party in central London on Saturday, Many also voiced concern about the generational fault line exposed by the vote between those who cannot remember a Britain without the European Union and those who can. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn told the audience the young people that voted overwhelmingly to remain must not be shortchanged. Many young people took to social media to vent their frustration after the shock result from Thursday's vote, in which Leave won by 52% to 48%. Meanwhile, more than 2 million people have signed a petition calling for a second referendum after a shock vote to pull Britain out of the EU. The website of the parliamentary petition at one point crashed due to the surge of people adding their names to the call for another nationwide poll following Thursday's historic vote. Signatories to the petition appear to be mostly in Edinburgh and London, both of which voted heavily in favour of Remain. There is no obligation in British legislation for referendums to have a minimum share of the vote or a minimum turnout, as in some other countries. But EU rules say nothing about a member state that has already begun negotiations to leave the bloc changing its mind and reversing that decision under Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty. The result of Thursday's vote revealed stark divisions between young and old, north and south, cities and rural areas, and people with and without a university degree. Parliament's Petition Committee, which considers whether such submissions should be raised in the House, is to hold its next meeting on Tuesday. The idea of a second referendum was raised during campaigning for Thursday's vote. UK Independence Party leader Nigel Farage suggested last month that a close Remain win would build up resentment and not be the end of the matter.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and allow me to welcome here in the studio Dr. Huda Raghib, Professor of Political Science and member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Pleasure.
And always joining us and having a pleasure of being joined by Mr. Nabil Zeki, journalist as well as prominent writer. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Let me start off, ladies first, Dr. Huda. How do you view, I mean, obviously let's take a step back. Let's just say, what brought about the whole idea of Britain staying or leaving in the European Union?
Well, this has been taken for some time, by the way, because that's due to the current situation. I mean, economic situation, the austerity measures that the government takes, and this is people can no longer stand unemployment. Also with the very currently pressing issue of the immigration and the influx of migrants to Europe in general, not only to Britain, but to other places. This is, again, along with that, I mean, these two major problems that really caused this thinking of exit from the European Union.
Right.
This is one thing. Another is also you have to take into consideration that Britain, or the United Kingdom, let me put it this way, the United Kingdom is very peculiar in a sense that it has two things, and this is, maybe we can talk more about it during the episode here. It's cultural, or
right.
Something that to do with culture. These people are really very much stressed identity, and also they're always, because it's of its geographical nature, it's islands, and they are isolated islands, and they are keen to be kept isolated and not really integrated with, I mean, with England or the United Kingdom has this tendency of being not integrating with other nations.
Right.
They think that, you know, they have a legacy of wisdom, and this is a conservative nature, and this conservative nature has been nourished very much by the growing rightist trends that's now growing. So these are just, I mean, as a beginning, why, I mean, they have been thinking very much about exit or withdrawing from the European Union.
A lot of people now are thinking that since the idea came about or was put forward by David Cameron as one of his election bids, that it was his gamble and that he is to blame for the situation right now. Do you agree?
Not only Cameron, I mean, yes, of course he is, though he is from the Conservative Party, and as I said, conservative, the rightist trend is very strong here, and they are for the withdrawal and not with the integration. Also, the Labour Party, that must be very much pro to be within, under the umbrella of the European Union. Also, they didn't do a good job. It was a total failure, particularly the leader of the
Jeremy Corbyn.
Labour Party. I mean, he was not at all convincing. He couldn't really influence voters in the referendum to keep into the European Union. So these things, I mean, this is really the people here.
And yet it's causing an internal rift right now within the Labour Party.
The crisis, the economic, and that's why no one of the leaders were influential enough to convince them to keep Britain or the United Kingdom within the European Union.
Well, let me ask Mr. Nabeel, did you expect the UK to vote to leave the European Union?
Did what?
Did you expect the United Kingdom to vote to leave the European Union?
Yes.
Right.
In spite
Why so?
of all what have been said before the referendum. Why? Because since a long time, many sections of people in Britain, not only in Britain, but also in France, in Belgium, in Italy, were complaining because they didn't feel that they are independent in deciding their own economic policy.
Right.
You know, there is a real bureaucracy in Brussels. In Brussels, they decide to what extent you have the right to be in debt. What is the size of your debt? To what extent you have the right to decide your expenses.
Right.
To what extent you have the right to have deficit, financial deficit. At the same time, if you take an example, Britain, in the year 2015, the number of immigrants to Britain was 350,000. Half of them from the EU.
Right.
Countries like Bulgaria, Romania, so on and so on. Of course, this must have burden on health service, education service, and so on. All kinds of services. At the same time, you feel, if you go to details, that you are talking now about the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, or the Tory. About the third of the Labour Party was on the side of the withdrawal.
Right.
5 ministers in the cabinet of Cameron himself is backing the exit. About third also of the Tory party was in the side of exit.
Right.
So, at the same time, according to the results of the referendum, you can find something very strange. For example, what is the percentage of those who voted because they are against multiculturalism? 39%. Those who are against immigration, 54%. Social liberalism, 35%. Environmentalism, 26%. Feminism, 6%, 22%. Globalization, 36%.
Right.
Capitalism, 43%. At the same time...
What does this say, though, about who went to the polls? Because right now the argument within the United Kingdom is that this was a racist and extremist vote that doesn't want, or that is going to nurture fascism, if you will, in the United Kingdom.
I agree with you that the far right played a very important role.
Right.
Not only in Britain, but they are playing the same role in France. Marine Le Pen and so on. So. Why? Because now you notice that terrorism, became something which is you witness approximately daily in Europe, terrorist attacks. And those who commit crimes, terrorist crimes, are not from the country. They are, at least some of them, among those who are immigrants, like this from Afghan origin who committed the last terrorist attack in the United States of America, and so on. So I believe that such terrorist attacks empowered the rightist extremist wing. You can notice, for example, that after this attack, terrorist attack in the United States of America, the happiest man in the United States was Donald Trump, the rightist candidate. By the way, he was supporting Brexit, and he congratulated those who voted in this direction. At the same time, you can feel something very significant in Europe and in Britain. In Britain, they feel that some steps taken by the EU was in favor, first of all, of Germany. And they felt that some decisions were taken as a prologue or first step to make Germany the state number one in Europe. So you can feel that there are contradictions. There are here the
So would you
British
say this was an informed decision, that this was a decision based on knowledge, or do you think it was just based on extremist rightist sort of ideology?
Both.
Right.
Why? Because, for example, there are those among the voters who feel that Britain now is not Britain.
Right.
Because those who came from abroad, or the immigrants, the refugees, so on and so, are changing the origin features of Britain.
Right.
At the same time, and this encouraged by the far rightists. At the same time, you feel that according to the economic policy, there is this bureaucracy in Brussels take the decisions. And those who take the decisions in Brussels are not elected.
Right.
They are just officials nominating themselves or nominated by some governments, and they take the main decisions according to their point of view, how they consider, for example, how to deal with the economic problem in Britain, in France, and so on and so on.
Okay, so if I would just move over to Dr. Huda and ask you now, according to the polls, the elderly and perhaps even the less educated, the rural population, were the ones who voted for a Brexit, while the younger generation was the one who voted to stay within the European Union. How do you view this particular...
Can I just correct, actually? It's not, I mean, here speaking with what is being said, you have to understand that who really voted for and who voted against. And this is really interesting to look at the northern parts of the United Kingdom, is that the northern part and the middle voted against. I mean, they wanted to exit, they wanted the withdrawal, because they are most marginalized, and not really the southern part. I mean, here by southern London, Lancashire, and these big cities where they have a lot of immigrants in it, and you have foreigners. Let me not only say the word immigrants or refugee, but foreigners, those who settled in London, but they are not originally English. I mean, they don't have the identity, originally speaking, I mean, here. So this is interesting to see that those marginalized countries, the northern parts and the middle, were the ones who really avenging, let's say, and voted against, and they wanted to have a withdrawal regardless of the age here, whether young or elders. It is this because they are also, the northern parts are the mostly suffering from these austerity measures and the economic crisis and the refugee. I mean, this is unemployment
No, but I mean, a lot of the, I mean, even in all British media, we're talking about the younger generation being robbed of their rights to find jobs. No, but I beg to differ, because the argument in some British tabloids is that the younger generation have been robbed by the older generation of the right to travel freely to the EU, to other 27 countries, and to find opportunities there. But the thing is, of the 27 countries in the other 27 countries in the EU, only Germany has the strongest economy. Everyone else is suffering high unemployment. Why would I be robbing the British youth of finding employment anywhere else? Anyone who travels to Europe has to know the country itself very well, has to know its language very well. So I don't understand really how that would be a consequence or would deprive, right?
Exactly. I can't agree more with that. Right. But this is what I wanted to, geographically speaking, to speak who were pro and who were against. Actually, this is, as I said, the marginalized parts. And maybe about the young, thank you for this piece of information, but I'm just saying about, I mean, here cities or areas that were being mostly suffering and not London or the big cities in this regard. But back to your question, can you just, sorry to remind,
Well, let's move on from that and perhaps look at what are the consequences now of this decision, not just on the United Kingdom, but on Europe as well.
That's very interesting, because you cannot know right now what's going to be the consequences, because it's too early. And I hope that this decision has been studied. I mean, of course, I mean, if you are going to withdraw or to keep yourself within the European Union, you have to understand what are the consequences is going to be. And I think these consequences were not thoroughly studied. This is more of, I guess, emotional. You wanted to have to be on your own. You wanted to be independent. And that really is going to reflect on two major things, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And they are going, because they wanted to be kept under the umbrella of the European Union, and that's why they are going, they're saying now, or they are threatening that they are going to have a referendum to get complete separation and independence from the United Kingdom, so that you're on your own as two sovereign states under the umbrella of the European Union, or within the European Union. And I think this is one big threat, that they're going to withdraw also from the Union, or the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom in this regard is no longer going to be United Kingdom. This is one basic thing that's been now very clearly declared or being said.
Well, indeed, today we saw the First Minister of Scotland say that the Scottish Parliament could actually veto the decision of the referendum. Would that be legal, though? I mean, you're going against, that's not very democratic, you're going against the will of 50-something% of the British people and what they wanted.
No, they say that's why they called for a second referendum. That is going to be up to 75%. And from the 75 it should be 60 and not 50 plus 1. It should be 60. I don't know how far this can be again eligible to do it. I mean, to have a second referendum. But this is one big threat, is now you're going to have this separation tendencies. And I think this is also going to reflect about many other countries that wanted to withdraw or don't feel comfortable due to the bureaucracy. And I agree very much with Brussels bureaucracy here, that it's and inhuman measures has been taken against, I mean, for deficit, for how much expenditures, I mean, government expenditures. All these are really very restrictive measures that not many countries, particularly southern countries, don't like to. They wanted to be on their own, decided on.
Mr. Nabil, if I come back to you, obviously, about the online petition that's currently underway, there is a petition for Parliament to look into setting up another referendum on this vote. Do you think that that is a possibility, that is on the table?
Not possible.
Right, why not?
Well, because it's finished. Now it's not a game to play again, no.
But right now, the decision has to go to Parliament, whether we like it or not. The results of this referendum have to go to Parliament to be ratified. The Scottish Parliament could veto this result. What do you think the most likely scenario is going to be?
Concerning Scotland, it will go in another way.
Right.
not only Scotland, but Northern Ireland. Not only Scotland and Northern Ireland. There is another part, another...
Wales?
No.
Not Wales. Oh.
Rock, Gibraltar.
Aha, Gibraltar.
Spain started now to demand
You're right, yeah.
to get it back. So, as you said, this is the, maybe we are witnessing the last days of the United Kingdom. I believe that the repercussions of this referendum will be very, very, very deep and very dangerous for Britain and for Europe in the same time.
Right.
But don't forget that now, for example, in the negotiations which will take place between the EU and Britain, from now you can wait for a certain method. What? That those leaders of the EU will make it very painful for Britain. I mean the conditions of the withdrawal.
Yes.
Very painful, so as not to encourage other countries to make the same.
But can the EU afford that? I mean, can really the European Union afford making it painful for the United Kingdom? How so?
How? I'll tell you. Now there are many treaties signed by Britain with the EU as a part of it, concerning markets, concerning budgets, concerning, for example, immigrants, many things. Now, that's why you can notice that leaders now want to make speed with the negotiations, not to wait for October till the party, the ruling party in Britain, choose a new leader.
Right.
Yeah. Now they want to start the negotiations tomorrow.
Right.
Why? Because they want to make the Britons pay the price of their withdrawal. That's what I conclude from this, this attitude. At the same time, I believe that there are also problems in the EU because don't forget that there is a rule, competition between the capitalists in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Spain, so on and so on. And they feel that the hegemony of Germany will not be in their benefit. I mean, some other European countries. Another factor here, NATO. Because the United States of America used to depend upon Britain to fulfill its policy in Europe.
Right.
For example, if the United States want to make tougher decisions against Russia after Ukraine, so it depends upon Britain. If the United States of America want more tough policy against Syria, so Europe will obey. I believe now maybe the Europeans will face more contradictions among each other after the withdrawal of Britain. And I believe that the United States of America lost a very faithful friend and faithful ally, because not only because of NATO, but because of even economic point of view, because the spokesman of the market economy policy is Britain.
Yeah.
So now you can feel one of the reasons of this withdrawal is that the British capitalists felt that maybe Brussels are binding them with some restrictions. For example, talking about labor benefits or labor trade unions' rights. In Britain, they don't like to hear something like that.
Right.
So I believe that the problem now is that there are contradictions now between France and Germany. How can they agree? There's a problem. Italy is hesitating and has many doubts about the EU.
Right. It does, because the first statement that you heard out of Italy was that the EU needs to look and revise its policy.
I was about to say this.
I'll give you an example. Last year I met the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs in Greece, the Greek one. He said to me, imagine, Mr. Zaki, now the EU gave us new credits, new loans, but the interests are very high.
You're very inhuman, by the way. Very inhuman.
So
yes.
it's a real problem.
Right.
In spite of the fact that some European institutions have to be blamed concerning the catastrophe, the economic catastrophe in Greece, in the same level like the Greek politicians.
Right. Well, let's take a quick break and take a look at some of Europe's reactions towards the Brexit, and then we'll be back to continue our discussion. Stay with us.
World leaders are stunned by Britain's Brexit vote to leave the EU, while fears grow of a domino effect challenging the bloc. Britons voted 51.9% to 48.1% in favor of leaving the bloc, upsetting the odds and sending shockwaves around the world as markets and pundits alike got caught out badly by the result. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said her nation takes note of the British people's decision with regret. There is no doubt that this is a blow to Europe and to the European unification process. French President François Hollande said that British vote poses a grave test for Europe, which must show solidarity and strength in its response to the economic and financial risks. Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi said in a statement at his official residence in Rome, "Europe is our house, the house of our children and our grandchildren. We know that the house needs to be renovated, perhaps freshened up, but that it will still be our house tomorrow." Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reached out to Britain and the European Union after Britons voted to split from the bloc, saying Canada would continue to build relationships with both parties. He added that the UK and the EU are important strategic partners for Canada, with whom the nation enjoys deep historical ties and common values. Pope Francis said that it was the will expressed by the people, and this requires a great responsibility on the part of all of them to guarantee the good of the people of the United Kingdom, as well as the good and coexistence of the European continent. EU Parliament President Martin Schulz hoped the vote would not trigger a domino effect, prompting other EU members to quit. European Union Council President Donald Tusk told reporters in Brussels on the behalf of the 27 leaders, EU members must be determined to keep their unity as 27. For his part, US President Barack Obama said the United Kingdom and the European Union will remain indispensable partners of the United States, even as they begin negotiating their ongoing relationship to ensure continued stability, security, and prosperity for Europe, Great Britain, and Northern Ireland, and the world. Obama added in a statement from his White House office that the people of the United Kingdom have spoken, and we respect their decision. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said on Friday that he expects the European Union to remain a solid partner for the United Nations on development and humanitarian issues, as well as peace and security, including migration, after Britain's decision to leave the bloc. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday said the British government was overconfident and superficial in the EU referendum and denied taking a position on Brexit. He added that it will have consequences for the United Kingdom, for all of Europe, and for Russia, of course.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're continuing our discussion about Britain's exit from the European Union. I'll come back to you, Dr. Huda, and you wanted to comment a little bit about what we were discussing before the break.
About what the EU is going to give painful strikes to England. I don't think so, actually. It's time for the EU as an establishment to revise its bureaucracy, to revise its economic measures. This is very important because, I mean, now Holland, as one of the founding founding states, it's also, there is the growing leftist trend here, and they are kind of appreciating what happened in the United Kingdom, and they really appreciated the referendum. And there is a tendency, they do the same, by the way, in Holland. So in other words, I think now the EU is going to start its decay in a way. I mean, its decay have started earlier, I mean, especially but what happened in Greece, and that's to show the inhuman measures that's been imposed on Greece because for bankruptcy and all this. So I think unless they revise their measures, they're going to collapse, and the 27 countries now is going to really spread around. And mind you that sovereignty is something very important, and many of these countries really cherish very much their sovereignty than to have independent say and decisions, particularly when it comes to their economic situation or economic policies. So I think the very idea of the European Union, I think I can see it in the near future, is going not to hold together.
Right.
Because, and that's why this is one thing, because I did make a study on it, is that's why the European Union, that was 10 years ago, they were thinking of having a common constitution, common government. I mean, they wanted to escalate it from economic to political to culture. On these grounds, it really collapsed. They couldn't have consensus.
Right.
And this is very important, I mean, to have common culture or common political constitutions. This didn't work. I mean, if it's only for the economic, it's okay. And it's among the founding countries and not all the other countries, as His Excellency says about Romania, and all these are not really as economically strong, or not equity here.
Right.
I mean, this is so. All this, I think the European Union would rather revise their measures rather than giving painful strikes to.
Because the argument is that they want to, if you will, make an example of Britain so that other countries wouldn't follow
suit. Of course,
suit.
It's because it was really came all of a sudden. You see, they didn't expect it, or it was expected, but they didn't. I mean, finalize it. It wasn't finalized. Okay, and even the procedures, it takes from 2 years to 8 years. It's not any that very quick procedure in this regard.
Right.
Yeah.
Today, the European Union actually clarified the way that the UK can kickstart formal negotiations. It said that Britain can trigger Article 50, which sets a 2-year deadline for the deal by either making a formal declaration or a letter or a speech. But can that actually happen when the Prime Minister David Cameron has stepped down as Premier?
Well, and that's why there is a call for a new leader for the party, for the Conservative Party, and then for early elections. Because once you have a leader, now you have to have early election. Interesting, the rise of a third party here, which is they call it the Independent Party, and this is really clearly a rightist party, and the world is so happy, and it's very influential in the street, mind you. It's very influential, though it's newly born, but it's very influential, and nobody knows. I mean, maybe in the coming elections, you will not have the Conservative, the Labour, but you can have also this competing.
But the UKIP is obviously a far-right party. It is very extremist in its views. It's very isolationist in its views. It's a growing
trend everywhere.
But let me just counter that argument with the fact that only a couple of months ago, Britain voted for its first Muslim immigrant, if you will, or of immigrant origin mayor.
Yeah.
So again, that's not necessarily the trend, because people sometimes choose to ignore that, whereas we're seeing for the first time, this is for the first time in British history, the Mayor of London, the capital of England.
Mayor, yes, exactly.
And he is Muslim of Pakistani origin.
Yes,
so,
indeed. Yes, indeed.
The trend doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I think it's just fear-mongering sometimes.
It's a growing trend. To what extent it can proceed or become predominant. This will take time, but
Right.
it is a growing trend not only in Britain, it's in all European countries. Mind you, also United Kingdom said, or Britain said, that it's going to withdraw from the EU, but not from the common market.
Right.
And that's an interesting point we can talk about.
Please go ahead then and tell me what the difference is.
Well, this is there because of it's a capital here, and that's why they are saying that the market is something different from that the European Union with its measures. They want to be the sole decision maker. It's a sovereign country, the sole decision maker. I mean, they don't want to follow the EU decisions. But the common market, it is something that is very beneficial. Why should they? I mean, of course, Britain has a very solid economy in this end.
Right. And what are the consequences, if I come back to Mr. Nabil, the consequences for the United Kingdom by making this decision and for Europe?
Of course, the British pound, the sterling will be lower.
Is this a short-term or a long-term effect?
In the short term.
Right.
Second,
Correct, yes.
prices will be higher, price of goods. Third, there will be a problem concerning some services or some branches of the economy connected directly with the EU. But I think that Britain will try to make separate deals with the EU in the future, of course, like for Switzerland, for example. At the same time, I think that the problem of the British businessmen is that, as they said, according to their own words, we want to get out of Europe to enter the world. What do they mean? They mean that they are looking for markets, Chinese market, Indian market, Commonwealth countries markets, Southeast Asia markets, so on. So I believe that they felt, as I told you before, some restrictions from Brussels, and they wanted to free themselves from such restrictions. Do they can they succeed? It depends upon many factors, which we cannot predict from now. But I think that maybe some other European countries will think in the
But do you think that the
British
fact
way.
that the UK do you think the fact that Britain never really took up the euro, for example, will help its economy recover more quickly? It has its own steady
You mean the British
currency,
economy?
yes.
Yeah. It depends upon many factors. You cannot tell yet from now what will happen. But I think that Britain is in need of, as some even British politicians said, new look to the economy.
Right.
Since the end of the Second World War, or let us say since the policy of Margaret Thatcher, what they call the economic liberalism.
Privatization,
Yeah,
yes, she
the
started that
privatization,
process.
all right. Since then, many things changed in Britain. And you notice that why they don't feel that they are independent, because even many industries and many projects became foreign projects, not British, with multinational activities and so on. So I believe that now you notice that they replaced a certain slogan. The previous slogan was, "It's better together." Now, small is beautiful.
Right.
Yeah. I believe that they want to feel that they can.
Right.
Without the EU. Are they going to succeed? It depends upon many factors again.
Well, what about it Britain's relationship and British ties with other countries, not just the EU now? Will it have to renegotiate its treaties and its agreements with the rest of the world?
I believe that, first of all, as I told you before, the United States of America lost something important in Europe. A country which used to represent the American point of view and the American policy. Second, now it's difficult more than any time before for a country like Turkey to join the EU.
Yes.
It's difficult even for Ukraine to join.
Yes.
It's now more and more difficult. So I believe that the Europeans will start to be more practical, more wise, more reasonable in their steps, because previously they were rushing in a certain way as to speed the so-called integration and so on, even on the expense of the interests of some people. That's why even in Europe, many countries, they were complaining of strict, and maybe they use the word savage austerity.
Right.
That's
Savage austerity, exactly, yes.
A point that we didn't touch on, or that we didn't get to touch on much, was the fact that moments after the results were announced, David Cameron resigned as Prime Minister. Do you think that was the right decision for him to make, Dr. Huda?
Well, actually, it came like, you give him really the shock of his life, because he was very much confident that, and he kept, urging the British people, to vote for it's yes and not no. But actually, it was again, that he was for his own integrity, or he couldn't really continue. And he said, I cannot continue with these measures now. With what is taking place now, and I really admire the man here. Here he says, I cannot continue. Right. Simply, and really, I would say and that's why he called for a new election within the party, and then early elections for the country. But let me just say something about Russia here. Russia is very happy because it was Britain, because of the sanctions of the European Union here. Now, I think Russia is going to benefit a lot.
Well, Russia also pointed out that it believed that this concept of a united Europe will fail, just as did the Soviet Union.
That's what I've been trying to say, the Soviet Union, exactly. Well, it reminds me, can I say something of also the Arab League, in a kind of way. It's the only thing about the European Union is the economy. But again, they didn't put it rightly. More and more restrictive measures, it's not really helping the country. On the contrary, it's not helping the country to flourish as it should be, or economic development as it should be. Many countries are stumbling, by the way, within the European Union. So I think, to what extent...
I like that term, stumbling, because do you think from now up until October, when there is an election for a new Prime Minister, that Britain will be stumbling along until it has a new leader to lead it? And do you think the British will vote for someone who was for the Leave vote?
That's a very good question, because actually so far those who are the candidates are for the Leave, to leave, pro-Leave. And they are very strong candidates. The Minister of Justice and also
Theresa May and Boris Johnson.
Exactly, Boris Johnson. Johnson, and they are both, were very much pro England to leave, or Britain to leave the European Union. Well, this is we'll see the near future what's going to, but yes, it's not going to really, for the time being, yes, things are not going to be right, but maybe for short term, I hope for short term.
And just finally, also a question for you, Mr. Nabil, how do you see as well, because now we're seeing as well turmoil within the Labour Party with regards to the shadow government resigning one by one, or one minister after the other, and all of them saying that leader Jeremy Corbyn was unfit to lead the Labour Party to a victory. Do you think that we're going to be seeing a new leader within the Labour Party before elections in October.
Now there is a real crisis, not only the Labour Party, but in the Conservative Party. Why? In the Conservative, because they consider that Mr. Cameron made wrong calculations. He was sure that he will win in this referendum. But at the same time, he didn't be well aware of what's going on in his own party and in his own cabinet, those who are against his policy.
Right.
The same thing, there is a crisis in the Labour Party. Why? They accuse Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the party, that he made a campaign in favor of remaining in the EU, but without enthusiasm. They said it. And
they called him today. They called him a good man, but a bad leader.
And he didn't use strong pretext to defend the EU. I believe that maybe the only winner in this story is Mr. Farage, the leader of the Independent Party.
Yeah, exactly. I was saying this is growing now like that.
Yes. So maybe you will follow in the next days or weeks or next months some changes in the map of British political parties.
And is that worrying? Do you find that worrying that far-right parties are gaining steam in Europe or in the world?
No, look, the problem is the successes of the far-right parties is not in our favor. For example, now Marie Le Pen is preparing herself to be the next president of France. But before blaming those people, or before blaming the European far-right, let us blame ourselves. Why? We are exporting to them from this region our own extremists and terrorists. And after every terrorist attack, the far-right is winning more supporters. That's the problem. So if we succeed here in this region to eradicate extremism and terrorism, we will find another thing in Europe, moving more healthy Europe than what is going on.
Unfortunately, that's all the time I have for this edition of the program. I thank you both very much for coming in. Dr. Huda Raghi, Professor of Political Science and member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs, thank you very much. Mr. Nabil Zeki, prominent writer and journalist, it was a pleasure having you with us. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. Do join us again tomorrow, though. Same time, same place here on Nile TV International. I'm Nancy Sarah Barakat signing off.